There are doors everywhere, and all of them locked. Suddenly, I saw something moving between two yew trees. A dim white figure.
The Threshold Paranormal Podcast starts now.
Thanks for joining us. This is episode 7. Episode 7?
Yeah.
Episode 7 of the Threshold Paranormal Podcast. We have our third guest with us today. We had Jay was our first guest.
True.
He was our Bigfoot guy. We've had my friend Chris Chomzak was our second guest. He was our ghost guy. So naturally, we have Thomas Wertman joining us, and he is our UFO expert.
It's gonna get crazy.
Yeah.
We'll talk about space.
So this is a little bit about Thomas. So I actually just met Thomas, I guess, 2 weeks ago. I was doing some research for. I'm in graduate school right now, and this article came out from the New York Times where they said that UFO sightings have increased like 800%. So I was like doing some research on that, and I wanted to reach out to somebody who knew a little bit more than I did. Well, a lot more than I did. And so naturally, I reached out to Thomas, and I was trying to get a comment from him, and our 20-minute conversation turned into like an hour-and-a-half conversation, and
it was a very interesting conversation.
It was a lot.
I was listening, and I'm like, this guy knows everything about UFOs. You are an impressive man.
Yeah. But just a little bit about Thomas. He is the Ohio State Director for MUFON. He was a member of the Cleveland UFology Project. I Googled you, Tom. From 2000. So if any of these are incorrect, this is your opportunity. Part of the Cleveland UFology Project from 2008 to 2018. You also joined MUFON in 2008, where you're now the Ohio State Director. You've investigated over 300 cases in Ohio and 230 investigations in Canada, the UK, and Puerto Rico. You've been on TV shows, documentaries, short films, and hosted the UFO Odyssey. That's UFO Odyssey podcast. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
The power of Google.
I think I got you in trouble that night, too. We were on the phone so long, you know?
Yeah.
Are we supposed to be that zoomed in up there? We are incredibly focused.
We are very zoomed in.
We are incredibly focused up there.
Camera's on the fritz already.
Slight camera delay.
We'll just put picture over that part.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. There we go. There we are.
All right. It wouldn't be our podcast unless there was some kind of major technical glitch right in the beginning.
It's always right at the start, too.
So I haven't talked to you in a couple of weeks, Tom. So how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Yeah. Has anything
just staying at home a lot, doing research, you know.
Anything interesting happened in the last couple of weeks that we need to know about?
Different ones are claiming, you know, hey, disclosures, you know, right around the corner. Well, I remember reading an article by some old UFO researchers, Stanton Friedman, back in the 1960s, that thought disclosure was around the corner in the 1960s. So I think we're still going to be waiting a little while yet.
So it's always just a couple years away.
Yeah, exactly. But I am seeing, you know, a little step forward and saying at least, hey, we've got videos, we don't know what they are. They're not saying they didn't eventually identify the videos. In other words, I'm talking about the Navy and different branches of the military, but they are, you know, kind of making some inroads there, saying, hey, our pilots are seeing some stuff. The videos are actual videos. Some of them, they don't know what they are. Some of them they do, most likely. They're just not saying it. But in the past, I mean, they basically would have covered a lot of that stuff up and just kind of blown it away.
So that's what I've noticed.
But now you've got pilots coming forward.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed too. Like in a bunch of the UFO reports, it just seems like now this seems like a big change that for the government to openly acknowledge something like that just seems it's just weird. It's something that I've never seen in reports. I mean, it seems like it's a very rare thing, you know. So that to me
exactly.
I mean, I can understand why people have the idea that the disclosure is imminent, you know, or some kind of news is on the way with it. I can understand why people have that mentality about it, Because that's kind of almost the vibe I get from it, man, is that.
Exactly. I mean, in the 1960s, they basically said, you saw Venus, a satellite, swamp gas, Now they're saying, hey, wait a minute, this was taken with a cell phone in the back of an F-18. And we're working on trying to figure out what it is,
It's to me, it's, we've spent all these years, with the hope of disclosure. And I mean, I don't know, for me at least, even if the government were to finally kind of come out with it and say something, to me, there's two options really as to how like it could kind of pan out. Do they know a lot about, UFOs and extraterrestrials? Are they fairly knowledgeable in the area, or are they just as left in the dark as us? Are they just as clueless as we are, and they're just kind of giving up the game of trying to hide it? Which to me, both options would seem kind of equally eerie. Is that they've been hiding a bunch of info, or they don't have any info.
Yeah, and both are plausible. But when you hear somebody like Commander Fravor, who was flying an F-18 that attempted to intercept, and I'm going to say attempted to intercept what they called a Tic Tac, and he said this thing takes off and leaves him in a cloud of dust like the Lone Ranger, hi-ho, silver away. And he goes, our fastest plane, the SR-71, he says, can't move that quick.
And just goes, the maneuvers
I don't
it
know
was
what
making.
It was, but I want to fly it.
Yeah, just the maneuvers, like the way they said it lost at some crazy amount of altitude to where it went, X amount of feet in the air to right over the water surface, like instantaneously.
Yeah, 80,000 feet. On one of them said 80,000 feet to sea level.
That's insane.
In about as fast as you can clap your hands.
That's insane.
Another one said, well, they corrected that, and they said, well, no, it wasn't 80,000 feet. It was only like 24,000 feet. Still, 24,000 feet at the clap of your hands is still fast.
That's a heck of a drop.
Now, in your opinion, with since we're on the whole, Fravor case thing, in your opinion, is there any way you can see around it that this could be not, alien in origin? This could be another country's tech, like China, Russia, because I know that we're on the cutting edge of like drone technology and unmanned craft right now. We're that seems to be a big focus militarily, is to not risk the lives of our troops to use drones. So you couldn't have a person in that object and do those kind of maneuvers and have them survive it. It's just wouldn't that kind of rapid deceleration would kill someone. But do you think it's possible that what is being captured could be the quote unquote drone technology of another country, or do you lean it more towards the extraterrestrial?
Yeah, when you look at just the G forces behind it, an F-18 can take about, I think as they said, 17 Gs. Now, if you're going from 24,000 feet to sea level in like less than 1 second, you're pulling probably 400 Gs. Now, I don't think China, I don't think the other countries have the technology to develop anything that can pull 400 Gs and get away with it. And not only that,
because it would damage the craft too, right?
Well, it damages the craft, but also it may be transmedium, which means it can go below water at high rates of speed.
And that's crazy because in the Fravor case, excuse me, don't they mention that the Tic Tac craft was seen doing that?
Yeah, when they said he observed it initially, he saw a disturbance on the water, which he didn't know whether something had sunk into the water or something was coming out of the water. He almost had the impression initially that maybe like a 737 jet went down and it just kind of sunk below the water. But then he sees above the disturbance the Tic Tac. And he goes down to do his intercept, and that's when it appeared to almost observe him. So as he's coming down at a big spiral, it mirrors his spiral going the other way, kind of like going around the opposite side of the circle. And that's when he tried to say, okay, what's the quickest way between 2 points? It's a straight line. So I'm going to cut across the circle and cut it off. And that's when it left him.
Because I remember he was saying that it was like from how it was flying, it was flying defensively.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, it was whatever was manning that craft knew defensive flight, knew to how to keep its distance and how to adjust to the situation.
That's right. And when you think about a drone technology, well, if another country was developing something, they would have to have a drone technology so they could detect him. They could pick out his movements and then basically create a defensive, like you say, plan around his motions on there. That's a lot of technology, which I don't think they have.
To have something like that. And then another thing, to keep something that advanced, that secretive, especially, for the other countries are constantly trying to infiltrate and get everyone else's secrets and stuff. So I think that's for another country to keep something of that magnitude away from the United States. I just don't see it happening. That's why, to me, I definitely lean extraterrestrial. And the whole event, I mean, with the open acknowledgement on the government's part is just, it all kind of goes back to when I believe it was Clinton, when he kind of came out with the whole Area 51, that when he was the first president to actually, I think, acknowledge the existence of that base out there.
Right.
And even that was a big thing. But now this is, to me, this is a whole nother level to it. This is a whole nother depth to the conversation.
Exactly. And some of the stuff may be intermixed with it, may have explanations. Like some of the stuff I've really been researching about some of the other later cases associated with the Navy, like going back to like 2019. You've got some stuff in there which is unusual. I mean, some of the things they're seeing. But on the other hand, they may be seeing known things, and maybe, I guess, best word is like a little bit of mass hysteria.
Yeah.
They're aware that something is maybe out there. And now, even though they're experienced, they're trained, they may be grabbing at some things, saying, oh, wait, that's a UFO.
Yeah.
And not really taking their time and getting a deep breath, saying, what are we really looking at,
Well, I don't know if you've heard of the theory. There's it's kind of like a theory that's been bounced around a little bit, is that, if you look, definitely after, World War II and after we started kind of the nuclear testing, is when sci-fi movies kind of really took off. Well, there's this whole little kind of, I guess, camp of thought of that, you have like the Men in Black movies, Independence Day movie. You have all these movies that are, there's this kind of idea that they are kind of numbing us to the idea of extraterrestrials. It's a slow buildup, like they're getting in our heads with it or something like that, because they're trying to prevent the mass hysteria. But in my opinion, if the government were to openly admit what is most likely out there, what is almost definitely out there, you are going to have many people in the country on Earth really not be okay with it and really be scared, genuinely scared.
Without a doubt, because I've been in a number of UFO meetings. I mean, here you have people who are definitely firm believers in extraterrestrials, everything, and they say, oh, I could accept that, if there's aliens coming here. I said, okay, now let me pause you. I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. What if you found out that Uncle Elmer, who ran away 10 years ago, didn't really run away, he was abducted? And what if you found out that not only he was abducted, but they were performing experiments on him and basically dissecting him? Could you accept that?
Yeah.
And the government, let's say, for example, has known about it for years.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, wait a minute. Well, I said, no, you have to look at that side of the coin too. That when you say let all the information out, who knows what's going on?
Yeah, that we don't know. We really don't know the depth of the information that they have. So, there's kind of three ways it could go. It could be very, very mild. It could be next to nothing, or it could be intense. It could be
Exactly.
scary, and that's to me is. For my own comfort, I would like to think that it would be somewhere in that middle ground. I want to be pushed a little bit, but for all we know, I mean, look at the historic documentation of sightings in the cases of abduction and the way it's all gone. to me, it sounds like in my personal opinion, I don't think that they're violent in any way. If they were violent, I don't think we'd be here right now if they intended to harm us.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think that the true depth as to what is really going on, and like you said about like, oh, well, what if we found out that old Uncle Elmer was taken away? I think that is likely the case, is that they're intrusive to us the same way that we are intrusive to like other species of primates. Like we go out into the jungle, we dart one, we take it back to a laboratory, we take it to a zoo, I think that unfortunately that's the case. That's kind of where my mind goes with it. I think that the Earth in general is more or less a study of theirs than anything else.
Yeah, I'm pretty much along the same feeling. You may have the whole spectrum out there, but I think we may be largely almost like the animals being tagged. You know, let's tag them, let's watch them for whatever purpose on there. And I think that's along that road.
Now, do you think our endeavors into like nuclear science, do you think that is what kind of piqued their interest here?
I think it can be a big factor, because they may have been here, for all we know, like going back to the ancient alien, type of theories and so forth. They may have been here for thousands and thousands of years. Who knows? Maybe they even planted the DNA, which got us rolling, basically. Yeah. We don't know. I just don't know.
Well,
but
speaking on that ancient thing, there was a question I was going to ask you, and I wasn't sure. I'm pretty sure you know all about this stuff. I'm sure you're familiar with Bob Lazar, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I was watching, one of the many things he's a part of, and he talks about how when he worked, I believe it was like the S4 facility, he calls it. He talks about us, the United States, having multiple craft in their quote unquote collection, and he said that one of those craft, to the best of his knowledge, was found at an archaeological site. It wasn't a crash necessarily, like a modern day crash. It wasn't it was dug up. And to me, like, I mean, the whole UFO crashes and everything else, that's crazy, that's weird, that's awesome. But that one line of his, that one really kind of freaked me out.
That I mean, it would jump out at you, because it's not the comment you normally hear. The comment you normally hear is it crashed. Let's say we were performing radar experiments back after World War II, high-end radar, and they theorize that may have what brought down one of the Roswell craft. Here's this super high-powered radar that we didn't have before then. They were testing it, and maybe that disrupted something, in the UFO. There's other theories about, let's say, lightning strikes, potentially hitting something like that, bringing it down. But, finding something, basically, it's been covered up for millennia.
Oh, yeah.
That's outside the box.
That's when it got literally to the realm of that science. It's something you would hear in almost Stargate or Lovecraftian kind of writing. It breaks the mold of the normal report, the normal kind of stuff. And to me, that, like, Bob Lazar's whole thing to me is that's just more evidence to me. I mean, the whole thing of his kind of records being wiped out and him essentially trying to be silenced, and that's the scarier part of it to me, is how actively they tried to shut him down, and how it kind of shown in what he was saying that they would bring the propulsion engine he was working on, or the propulsion, whatever you want to call it, that they got from the craft, is how the government really did not know. They knew how it worked, but they didn't know the details of it. They were never able to kind of crack the code. And so how he thinks that every couple of years they would just bring a fresh pair of eyes into it, and it's just an ongoing mystery. And that's kind of what makes me lean to the idea that I think our government knows enough, but there's still a great deal that they're kind of unaware of.
Yeah, I think there is, because, there's always been those theories about, craft crashed, being recovered. Here in Ohio, we've got Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. There's rumor for years that's where they're ending up at, is Wright-Patterson. And I could actually see that over in Area 51, to be honest with you. Not because I'm from Ohio, but it's just because of the fact that you're hiding it in plain sight. But what I would also do is I'd put it below ground someplace, and a lot of Wright-Patterson stuff is below ground. You put it below ground someplace knowing nobody can get to it. It's almost like, the old movie Independence Day. You put it below ground, you basically seal it up so nobody can get access to it. That way you restrict who can get to it. Because if you think about it, I mean, analyzing, let's say, potentially metals, to me would be easier than, let's say, for example, how the craft would actually potentially be controlled, its power plant. That could take hundreds, who knows how many years. It's the comparison I have is go back and give somebody like Alexander Graham Bell a cell phone and say, make it work.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have a clue.
Send me a picture.
Right.
Yeah. He wouldn't have a clue. I mean, he wouldn't know the technology behind it. And it would take who knows how many years for him to gradually, attain that knowledge.
Yeah. So that bears the question then, like, because I know UFO reports, UFOs come in all shapes and sizes and colors of the rainbow. So it's like, how have UFO sightings changed over time? Do they seem to come in like patterns? Are there like, these are the types of UFOs people saw in this decade, these are the types of UFOs people saw in this decade? Are there trends like that, or is it pretty much just a scatter shot?
There's a little bit, but behind that, looking at it realistically, I always have to go back and say, let's look at the accuracy of the witness's story. Because that's where everything is being acquired from. Well, I saw a triangular craft. Okay. Based on your opinion, you saw a triangular craft. Or I saw, let's say, this large ball. And one of the best examples I've got is I got a report in one day. You look at the report, the witness says he sees this alien craft. He said the craft has to be 300 feet long. So you make the note, 300 feet long. Well, how far away is it from you? Well, it was only like 10 feet. And I'm thinking, crap, you're about to get your ass crushed, guy.
Get out of the way, man.
That's where the thing sits down at. And I said, okay, now, if you held your arm out, this is where the real test comes in. You hold your arm out, arm's length. If you had an object in your hand, how big would it be? Well, it was about the size of a dime. No, wait a minute. You're telling me your arm's out at arm's length. The object was the size of a dime in your fingers. But yet the thing was 300 feet long and 10 feet away from you. So when you look at facts, it all falls apart.
Well, it's like we run into that too, or we've ran into that with the cryptid stuff. Yeah, with the cryptid stuff is that, for sure. And it's just, unfortunately, it's human nature. Is we are just naturally really bad at judging size at a distance.
Yeah. Well, and we like to elaborate. We like to make things sound a little better.
Oh yeah, we're all about our
just
stories.
Just like Uncle Paul comes in with the fish he caught yesterday and how big the fish was.
It was a 6-foot catfish.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, all right, it was a 2-pound bass. Calm down.
and that's where you have to base everything to begin with, is the initial report and the accuracy. So when I get these different shapes coming in, spherical shape, triangular shape, you have to go back and really review the witness's testimony. And I'm not saying all witnesses are bad by any means, but it's a consideration you have to look at as the accuracy of information. Now, one thing that I think we've noticed more is you get more of the triangular shaped craft, like starting right around the 1980s, 1990s. Back before then, you had more of the dish-shaped objects. Some of the ones that, some of my classic cases, the objects were more dish-shaped.
Now, wasn't there, and quote me if I'm wrong, I believe that there's a theory that the whole triangular craft sighting idea, that the government supposedly has, I don't know the name of it, but there's supposed like a top secret stealth craft that we have that is triangular shaped, and that's what a lot of people are crediting those reports towards.
You're right. And the one that it's called the TR3B.
Okay, yeah.
That's the name of it. It has almost like a ball in the center of it that some say it's like the power plant. I'm not 100% sure in that whole project, because when you go back and look at the history of like what the U.S. has tried to do in technology, trying to develop things along those lines on their own. I mean, you go back to the late 1950s, 1960s. You go down to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, you can see the Avro car. Avro car was basically a disc that had this big fan pointed down towards the ground. That the estimates were saying, oh, this thing is going to go 400 miles an hour. It's going to go to 30,000 feet.
Really over optimistic.
Reality is it got about 2.5 feet off the ground and went about 10 miles an hour before it almost tilted over, you know. and it was built by a Canadian company on top of that.
So we're going to blame them on that, right?
U.S. Tech.
We're going to blame them.
But
good job, Canada.
Yeah, you look at something like that and some may say, yeah. Well, some may say, oh, that's just kind of like a cover-up thing. No, this is the attempts that they were making. And if you go 20 years forward, 30 years forward, could we jump that far?
Oh, and you have to think too that if we failed once at making a craft, we've definitely failed more times. So I'm sure that if we saw the spreadsheet of the amount of good old American tax dollars wasted on aircraft, we'd probably be a little sick to our stomach. We'd probably be like, oh.
You're right there, without a doubt. I mean, I'd be saying, can I just have a tiny little bit of that for my research, just a tiny bit,
Talking about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, you walk through a museum and you're like, oh, there's a couple $1 million. There's a $50 million airplane just sitting here on display,
Well, they've got one of the earlier B-2s. I mean, there you're talking $1 billion in research setting right there.
Jeez.
But also, going back to Wright-Patterson, I think that would be a good place to also hide some stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Here you've got a museum. You're getting stuff in from all over the world. And it's not just new stuff. I mean, they're pulling out parts of V-2 rockets out of, like, fields in Europe, bringing pieces of them back to eventually, like, put whole stuff together. But, I mean, you could put stuff in boxes, bring it in, let's just say, for example, alien technology. And it's kind of like the Indiana Jones movie. Let's kind of put it in this crate. Let's put it in a warehouse for years in plain sight. And nobody knows it's there.
Man, I'd love to have a job. I'd love to have a job in that warehouse.
Piece of machinery that we just stored away.
And you got to think, like, you have thousands of people, probably a million or more people visiting that per year. To me, it's the obvious. It'd be a very obvious hiding spot. It'd be a laughably obvious hiding spot.
Oh, sure. And I actually applied for a position down at Wright-Patterson as like a teaching job one time.
Was that prior to your UFO stuff, or?
No.
So I'm telling you what they did. They Googled you and went, no.
Yeah.
Can't have this guy.
And not only that, it gets better than that. I applied for Bob Bigelow's company too.
Whoa. Okay, now this kind of leads us into another thing I wanted to talk to you about, because this is one of that's the kind of thing, the whole Bigelow thing interests the hell out of me. Is the Skinwalker Ranch, and I know you got to know a lot about that, because that whole chunk of property, especially because we dabble into everything in the kind of paranormal blanket, is that property literally has everything going on, and if I'm not mistaken, there has been military involved, like, or U.S. government involvement on the property.
Yeah, and do you know where? Well, it goes back, like, you're familiar with the ATIP program.
Yeah,
the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program. Before ATIP, it had a different name, and they were looking at paranormal. Not just UFOs.
Because the paranormal stuff, the paranormal thing, because I was reading a bunch of reports, is like literally every family that has been involved with the ranch, because the actual name is the Sherman Ranch. It's in Ballard, Utah. And it's very close to the, I believe it's the Ute Indian Reservation and stuff. So, with the Native American tradition of their kind of Skinwalker legend, that's kind of where it came from, because they were having reports of shape-shifting entities being seen, of in all of the buildings, they were hearing, voices, seeing strange things, objects moving. They had instances of what they would call portals opening up on the property and seeing things come through them or go into them. And it's just that property, for some reason, and some people attribute it to the Native American, maybe rituals that were performed on the property. Or it could be just a hot spot for it. But that property just has, to me, the weirdest activity imaginable.
I would definitely like to go out there. I've openly said that. And I was making comments on my own radio show, and I said, if anybody out there is listening, involved with the ranch, I will fly out on my own dime.
I'll come out on a bicycle.
Spend some time out there, because I've watched a show. They had their new series start the other day, and to me, there's a number of things they should be looking at. They're not. They're putting some fluff out there to draw people in, to get them attracted. And some of the fluff that they're putting out there, I think if you looked at it seriously, would be easily explainable. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But some of the other things that I'd like to really delve into, like the frequencies, the radio frequencies and so forth out there, that part intrigues me.
Now, what's that?
Naturally occurring?
Well, they're picking up all these different radio frequency bandwidths at certain points. Supposedly it's knocking out cell phones and so forth. I'd like to look at that. I mean, here you get this big spike, and not just one frequency, but across the entire board. All these frequencies go up pretty much simultaneously. So it's not just like AM, FM, but it would be like TV bands, cell phone. I mean, all these frequencies at the same time just spiking, which is like that's.
And there's almost no natural explanation for that. I mean, you could. Yeah. I mean, there's
about ley lines and crystal structures on the ground.
It kind of goes into what they think of, like, with the whole energy thing. I don't know if you're familiar with kind of what they call like spook lights or whatever, where it's like it's a naturally occurring,
almost like a hologram sort of thing.
Well, it's a discharge of energy from. It might even be quartz, like a high concentration of quartz area in an area that. But like even then, that is known to give off an energy and mess with equipment and cause spikes, but nothing to that degree.
Just naturally occurring minerals in the ground.
Nothing to that level.
Yeah, and things if they're actually picking up like radiation level. I mean, here you get a radiation level go way up. Next thing you know, it's completely gone.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, a guy supposedly gets radiation burns on his hands, parts of his body, and then they go back and there's nothing later on. I mean, even the equipment he has triggers the equipment he has on. It shows, hey, you just got blasted of a high radiation level. And they go back and it's like somebody just turned off the whole thing and it's now all gone.
That's weird. That's not how radiation works.
No, there should be like a trace left behind.
Right.
Or something like if something was that intense.
It would be contaminated.
Now, do you know anything more into kind of a two-pronged question, into the government involvement on the Skinwalker Ranch? And also, I know that it was sold rather recently to like an anonymous buyer. So,
he's not anonymous. Actually last year they came up with a series, and Bigelow, he actually had his own scientific group before. And I'm going to back up a second because kind of like giving you a little idea. Harry Reid, who is a senator out of Nevada, he caught wind of a book, The Hunt for Skinwalker. And he reached out to Bob Bigelow, who owns Bigelow Aerospace, which coincidentally is from Nevada in Las Vegas. They hook up, basically to keep the story short. They get together, and he starts looking at things, and he really gets interested in it. Harry Reid does. He gets a couple other senators on board, and this is where they get some funding put out to basically go into what was described as the ATIP program, the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, which ran from like 2007 to 2012. Well, they needed somebody to get this information from. I mean, who's going to run this group? Well, they supposedly found, again, depending on how you believe the story, Luis Elizondo says, I ran the organization. And he says, basically, we had limited funds. So what they did is he contacted Bob Bigelow, because Bob Bigelow had been running his own scientific group. He was looking at the Skinwalker Ranch. He had his own scientist. He's put a ton of money into UFO research. So at Bigelow, they contacted Bigelow, and Bigelow basically starts doing the legwork. He's got investigators researching stuff. He's got his own group basically put together. So what this ATIP program is, they started basically subcontracting Bigelow out to research the UFOs, to follow up on cases. And for a while, they made, well, it was like about 1 year, funds went to MUFON, the organization I'm with. The idea was, let's give them some funding, so if they get some hot cases, we can get investigators boots on the ground now. Think about from your paranormal point of view. What if you had a kiddie that said, hey, you want to go out and get some equipment? It's yours. You need to get to the other side of the state in an hour? No problem. It's there. If you had that type of funding. Yeah. So he put out so much funding, and we started turning reports into him, not our state locally, but the national organization started giving him feedback on things. They also had access to the database. Our database is extensive with cases going back years. Well, to me, that's one of the things you'd really want. Well, they found out after about a year that the deal wasn't all they thought it was going to be from the information I got. It was more one way. He was getting everything, but there wasn't a whole lot coming back as far as, well, gee, this case here, we followed up on it. We found these materials, and this is what our researchers found out on the materials. There was nothing like that really coming back. Also, I think the biggest deal breaker is MUFON's a volunteer organization. We're not a big corporate thing where you're going to be, where they tracked everything down to the penny, most likely what he does. Well, that was another issue. So when he's looking probably at where all these pennies are being spent, wait a minute, you're not tracking everything as like I want to see it tracked. So that was another thing that probably didn't help.
They wanted to see the receipts, and it got them.
Wanted to see the receipts. And in Ohio, we never got a penny of it.
Yeah.
It was actually some of the states out west is the ones that got a lot of it. But he had this going on. Also at the same time, I'm going around checking stuff, and I found out he bought some different websites. One was out of Canada, and this Canadian research site was getting UFO reports in. This site is sold, and it just says the new owners of the site are called Bass. Bass is Bigelow Aerospace.
Oh, God.
Well, not only that, it gets better than that. A friend of mine in a local UFO group says, hey, I saw a UFO the other day, and I called up our local airport, which is Akron-Canton, which is a regional airport. They called up Akron-Canton. Akron-Canton says, well, here's a number for Oberlin Control, which is basically ATC, air traffic control. Here's their number, call them. Well, they call up Oberlin ATC, and they say, oh, no, here's another 800 number to call. And they said, it shows a group I'm not familiar with. Well, this goes back to that same 2007 to 2012 time frame. It said Bass, Bigelow Aerospace. Man, they were diverting all these UFO reports going to the government right to Bass.
And you got to feel like that is almost legally... You're getting into some shady areas there.
It's kind of ominous a little bit.
You're getting into...
It is, but it's no longer there because the funding ran out. Bigelow backed out then because, supposedly the funding dried up right around that 2012 time frame. So if no funding, hey, I'm not going to work with you anymore for free, So he basically backed out, and they pulled his name off of the FAA website then. So now they tell you to contact like local UFO groups or the police if there's a major thing.
So who's the new owner? Who is this? The new people, the new kids on the block.
I'm trying to remember his last name. His first name is Brandon. He's actually a real estate developer out of like Utah.
And he wants to put some nice apartments on the place.
Well, yeah. Well, what he is he's picked up on the fact. He's interested in it.
Yeah.
He saw the stuff going on with Bigelow, so he bought the place. But now they're in their second season of a TV series based on it.
So that TV series is his venture?
I don't think it's his venture totally, but probably History Channel reached out to him and said, "Hey, we're interested in this. This would make a good series."
I've caught a little
we'll
bit
work
of it,
with
and it's good TV, but that's about as far as I'd take it.
Yeah, that's the point I'm coming from. I'd love to go out myself because there's some things I see that I'm interested in. But what they're doing is they're putting more emphasis on, to me, what I call some of the fluff.
Yeah.
Look,
gimmick.
there's a cattle down. Oh, look, there's an object in front of the cow. It's hovering over the cow. I hate to jump on the skeptic side right away, but I think very likely it's a fly flying in front of the camera. Right. At the same instant they took the photograph.
Yeah.
Or they come out and they say, but we ran in our control room and there was no aircraft out there. Well, I've got a transponder in my office behind me, a receiver, that I can pick up aircraft above us right now. And it goes from my receiver into a international group. Well, this is when you see these people tracking aircraft. This is where they're getting their information from, is people like me with receivers in our houses or someplace. But if you have a region out in Utah that nobody has a receiver, well, they can't get a signal on aircraft if there's no receivers in the area that can pick up anything.
Right.
Because mine will reach out, I think they say about 200, 250 miles.
Wow.
But if you have something that's out there in the region that it can't pick up aircraft, how do you know that there's no aircraft there?
True.
You don't.
Yeah, that's when you get out to that area. It's the desolation is. I mean, it's good to get away from everyone to kind of do your investigation, but it's also a double-edged sword. It's kind of shoots you in the leg as far as being away from all the tech that could benefit you.
Right, and they've got a lot of tech out there. But myself, I'd like to say, just get the hell out of my way. Let me use your tech and let me see what I turn up.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm no rocket scientist like the one guy is. Well, I'm a rocket scientist. Yeah, but I look at a couple things and say, I'm no rocket scientist either, but damn, I can see right through this right now, because it could be analyzed better, I think.
Yeah. What do you think that the TV crunch is mostly to blame for that? Because I remember back when I was more involved in the Bigfoot stuff, like exclusively involved in the Bigfoot stuff, the whole, everyone's dream ideas to be like, I just want to be on a TV show, I want to do this and this. And then we would go to these conferences and stuff, and you talk to the people who are on the TV shows, and they're like, don't do the TV shows. If anything, do the smaller kind of self-funded documentaries and stuff like that. Is more of a better way to express yourself and get the message out there, because the TV shows you are playing by their rules, not your own.
You're 100% right. I've done the documentaries, enjoyed them.
Yeah.
I've done some TV shows, not as enjoyable, because when you see the finished product come back, you're at the control of producers and people with basically you're on what's on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, and they manipulate your kind of the footage they get with you and the questions they ask you. They can. It seems to me like they ask you things and put you in situations that are easily spinnable, kind of that could either paint you in a positive light or really quickly paint you in a negative light.
They can change the context in which
very quickly.
They're interviewing you, or they can change the order in which you respond to questions to fit the narrative. And I mean, we talk about that a lot with all paranormal shows, really, is they have to have a 45-minute episode. And that 45-minute episode has to lead into the next episode. So they have to build this kind of like story arc, in a season to keep it going. And life just doesn't work out that way all the time. It's not how an investigation works.
Yeah, you're right. And that's why I'm not a fan of a lot of the shows out there. I watch them, like you said, for entertainment purposes more than anything else, or maybe to see how other people are presenting things. I look at it from that perspective. But some of them are, I hate to say it, out and out terrible. Yeah. One of the ones I'll never forget was Chasing UFOs. It was on for like one season, something like
Travel
that.
Channel or something like that.
Yeah, and one of my friends was on one of the episodes. And I even knew one of the other individuals on the show. His name was James Fox. He's done a couple great documentaries. He just turned out Phenomena, which is a movie not too long ago.
We watched that.
Yeah, watched that.
And James Fox, nice guy. He's like he says, I'm not a UFO researcher. He says, but I'm very interested in the subject. Well, they brought him on the show because he was a name. Well, he's got documentaries out, so let's get him on there. Well, next thing you know, he's running through the woods at night with a backpack with lights on it, looking for UFOs. And I'm thinking,
what are you doing?
we just cross this up with Bobo.
Exactly.
All of a sudden,
they're going to be doing UFO calls in the woods.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm like, what is this? And I met, me and James I had him in for a conference, and we're out, well, let's just say drinking one night, because that's what we were doing till about 2 or 3 in the morning when we got thrown out.
Right.
But I said, I got to ask you, the series, Chasing UFOs. And he goes, they told me it was going to be 90% serious, 10% comedy. He says, once it started, it was completely flipped around, 90% comedy, 10% serious. And he goes, I got my name on a contract. What can I do?
Yeah, true. That's kind of how they get you.
Well, there's been a few of the paranormal shows that have actually gotten busted for that. They got caught forging stuff or manipulating their equipment and, kind of fudging the findings, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame.
It is a shame.
Another name I kind of wanted to throw out there your way, and I'm sure being as involved in it as you, the Dr. Steven Greer.
Yeah.
What's your kind of thoughts on what he's doing and his whole direction?
CE5.
I see the smile. I see the initial reaction. So now I'm interested.
This is why I caught some crap with some of the local UFO groups, because you have different ones who, jump on everything hook, line, and sinker, and buy into stuff. And I'm one that I don't tell people I'm a skeptic, but I go in with a skeptical point of view. Let's look at the data and let's analyze it seriously to see where it's leading.
Well, that's healthy. That's what you should. What you should.
Exactly. And when I look at do UFO research, I look at not only UFO sites, but I look at the skeptic sites for comparison. I say, okay, maybe somebody turned over this nut, and they produce something that's, hey, maybe they're on track with this, So you have to look at it that way. But with Greer, I'm on the fence. I'm like, you're telling me you're going out there and they're summoning UFOs. Because we had a guy come into our local Cleveland group that one of his claims was, hey, I associate Steven Greer, the groups that meet out there. Summoning UFOs. Well, we went out the one night and we did this exercise where, okay, let's go out and let's try to summon a UFO.
This meditation in a field.
Exactly. So I thought, okay, let's see how it's going to happen, because I like to put myself in these situations. Sure. Let's see how it really happens.
Give it a go.
Yeah. So we go out to the state park late at night. We're on the state park and we get around this big circle out there, and they start playing like Indian chants and so forth on there. I'm like, okay, interesting, because like you mentioned earlier, the Indian side of some of these things, there may be a very strong connection there. Yeah. And I want to find out. But then out of nowhere, they start playing the Carpenters calling all ancient aliens. I'm like, what the hell is this got to do with
what
this
did I get
crap?
Involved with?
Yeah. I'm like, oh man, I should be drinking right now.
To be fair, we can never be 100% certain. The Carpenters might very well be the extraterrestrials' favorite music.
Exactly. It could be. Well, okay, you win.
Just start making an alien playlist.
Convince George Clinton with the mothership connection.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, then he gets out. We start looking around the sky, and they start trying to point things out, and he gets out this laser pointer, and he's pointing at an object, and he says, "There." I said, "That's an airplane."
Stop pointing a laser at it.
The guy is a commercial airline pilot.
And that's a felony, isn't it?
No, it's not. He goes, "No, it's not." I said, "Damn it, it is." I said, "I live in this region." I said, "That area over there is Cleveland Hopkins International Airport."
Because that's a felony charge. Like doing that is like a crime, right? Yeah. That's a big criminal offense.
And I'm thinking, here we are all going to get busted, you know. But everything the guy showed me that night, I'm looking at like, you know, if you're an example of Greer's group, which, I mean, he may be one that's unique out there for all I know. But I wasn't seeing a whole lot positive from my point of view.
Yeah. I will say the one thing that spoke to me was in his, I mean, I've watched I can't remember how many documentaries of his, but I think at least 2 that I've seen. The footage he had was, I mean, I'm not saying it was, you know, blew my mind, but a lot of it was some interesting footage. And it was footage I hadn't seen like on YouTube and other documentary TV shows. It was newer footage, and you know, we live in the time now where, you know, almost anything can be photoshopped and faked, but it was impressive nonetheless. And that to me, like I, you know, I'm coming at this kind of from the, you know, I haven't been as deeply involved in this as you, so I'm sure you've seen evidence that is astounding, but to me that his alone was impressive. I'm not saying it's his, but his groups.
Well, see, there's the thing is, when you get so much stuff coming out, it's separating the wheat from the chaff and what is good and what isn't. And the problem I've got is sometimes that, you know, if you're turning out all this stuff and saying, hey, this is unreal, you may have some stuff that really is unreal that's really interesting in that whole mix. And it could be discarded because of some of the other stuff that's being put out. And that was the problem I had with that individual that night, who I won't use his name, but he presented stuff. He showed me pictures and other things out there of stuff that we don't have enough time to get into. There was just that really tore his whole story down to me. But the reality is, you may have some people out there have some fantastic videos and other stuff. And the bad part is I look at stuff based on what I'm seeing from him. And you've got to be careful so you don't stereotype the whole group based off of this one individual.
True.
Because you could totally discard everything from, you know, Greer's group based off that one person. I just had a very bad taste that night after he left, that I didn't see a whole lot of positive, because he even showed me this is one of the best UFO photos I've ever seen. Really? I'm like, damn, I've seen that photo someplace before. Wait a minute. Let's go in. He's from such and such a state. So I get into their database and I start searching through all the pictures and going, damn, here's the report. It was a UFO report. And the investigator said, this is a cell phone app on a phone to put a photo into a UFO into a photograph.
Oh my God.
And this is why, I had my opinion, because, and I'm like, damn it, I knew it was. And when I looked at it, I pulled the original image up from our database and looked at it on my computer. I'm going, this is altered in some sense. This is not a raw photograph. This is something that's been implanted in there.
Not even a good hoax.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the investigator even approached a witness about it. He says, did you alter your photograph? Oh, no. He says, this is a cell phone app that puts a UFO in a photograph. Really? Well, I don't know how it got on my phone. Oh, come on. Give me a damn break, guy. Are you serious?
To me, that just,
it
poisons the well. It when you have people, because, I mean, when we were in the Bigfoot thing, you have people that do that kind of crap too. And it's just, it almost takes the wind out of your sails when you have people doing stuff like that. It's like, come on, man. Like, we're all sitting here, especially when you have people that, you have many people that invested whole parts of their lives into these things.
Reputation.
Their reputation, and they take it very seriously, and you have a couple whack jobs that just ruin it for everyone.
Bought a gorilla suit for everyone on Amazon.
Without a doubt. And that's why, when somebody asks me about Steven Greer, that's why I kind of react the way I do, because there's some things interesting, but I'm like, if everything is based on this guy, they're in trouble,
Yeah. It's it's totally understandable. That's your reaction, and it's good to what I should have done when watching his stuff more, because I'm not gonna lie, when I first watched it, I was hyped up, I was intrigued, but you got to be able to rein yourself in and temper your expectations and your thoughts. You got to be able to kind of understand things, in a non-biased light, which I think is good.
There's a heavy dose of theatrics in his.
Oh yeah,
in his film.
But
I
it
think.
makes good listening.
Makes great
They're good
Sure.
watching. That's
video.
part of. You don't want to put out something that someone's going to get
boring.
10 minutes in and be like, okay, I'm going to
That's
go watch popcorn in my microwave for another 10 minutes. Just to have some excitement.
So that does pose the question though, if we're trying to investigate ghosts, we go to a presumably haunted place, or if we're trying to find Bigfoot, we'll go to Salt Fork or travel out to the Pacific Northwest or wherever. But UFOs. I'm being presumptuous. UFOs is a weird one because it's where do you go to see one?
Well, different ones will say, hey, go out to Sedona, go out to certain places like that. But, they get a lot of reports, but I'm not sure if there's really a true hotspot, because I'll say, some people say, hey, New York's a hotspot, Ohio's a hotspot. Well, based on what? Yeah. What data are you basing everything off?
What's the gauge?
Well, we got X number of reports in Ohio this month. I said, okay, now let's take all these cases. All the ones you can explain, take them out.
Right.
Now let's look at another. Now what have you got? Also, besides that, let's look at the population of the state based around where those cases are at. Mm-hmm. Well, most all these cases are around the bigger cities. Well, it's because you have a lot more people there.
Well, that's kind of it's interesting. It's interesting as hell that you say that too, because the idea we had, and I'm going to throw back to Jay, our Bigfoot guy. He always, his big thing, and I heard him say it a bunch. Shout out Jay, was it takes two ingredients to have a sighting, and that's a sighting of anything. You need people and whatever it is you're looking for. So we would, with the Bigfoot thing, we were focused on this area of Ohio. It's called, I don't know if you're familiar with, called Vinton County. I think it's in southeastern Ohio, but it is a very rural county, like one street light in the whole county, no McDonald's in the county. And it has what I think is still the lowest population density of a county, and it's a good size county. And there's only been, back when we were doing the Bigfoot thing, there was only 3 reports out of it. So no one ever looked into it because they're like, oh, well, there's nothing going on there because there's only 3 reports. Well, there's probably only 3 reports because there's no one there. Yeah. There's no one there to give the report, And then with the report thing, you got to figure how many people actually, you working with MUFON, how many people do you genuinely think see something and then report it? Most people just see something and go, I saw something weird.
That's right.
Tell their family and friends, and that's as far as it goes.
You're right, because a number of people may say, I already believe in aliens, so I don't have to put anything out there to convince anybody. I know they know they exist. Yeah. Or you get the ones who don't even know about MUFON. Yeah. What if they don't know about who to report it to?
And what's insane is how big you guys are, how big of a presence you have in the field, and even then you're still unknown. So you have these, one of the big things is the BFRO for Bigfoot.
Right.
And we would do these kind of like town hall little talks, and we would ask these people, okay, well, did you ever report your sighting? Well, no. I didn't know how, or more or less didn't care to, And people, a lot of it, and I'm sure it's involved in everything from Bigfoot to ghosts to UFOs to the Loch Ness Monster. If people see something weird, there's the ridicule factor. There's the, I don't want my name to be associated with, X. I don't want it to be, to me to be thought as a crazy person. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate, but it's understandable.
Right. And it still exists, not as much as it used to in all fields, but that stigma still existed. Because one of the cases that I was talking to Dylan about, the case over in Trumbull County, when you listen to the tapes of the 911 tapes from the 1990s, it's basically okay, off camera, you hear the cops laughing their butts off, making jokes about all this stuff. And they're making, they know nobody's going to supposedly hear it.
Now, what case was this?
All these jokes. What's that?
What case was this?
Trumbull County. It goes back to 1994.
Was that here in Ohio? Was that Ohio?
It's in
or-
Ohio.
Yeah, Trumbull County's over by Youngstown area.
Oh, was this the one you guys talked about?
It's one of the ones we talked about. We also talked about one with the a military helicopter encounter.
Coyne Incident.
It was called the Coyne Incident, going back to the 1970s.
Now, are those two some of the famous ones out of Ohio?
There's a number of really good ones, and what I was talking to Dylan about, people, when you talk about UFOs, they think of Roswell, they think of, in this case, Phoenix Lights, of Rendlesham Forest. But I said a number of states actually have cases themselves that, to me, rate really high. Like, one of the things I'm in is a research group of guys going back to the 1960s. These guys are serious researchers looking at data and so forth. And when I talked to them, last time we got together was like about a year and a half ago. I said, in the top 10 cases of all time, which ones do you think would rank up there? Well, the Coyne incident ranked like in the top 5 of all time, period. In this case, when it goes back to one that happened in Portage County, which is over by Akron area, back in the 1960s, that also ranks up in the top 10, if also not the top 5.
That's impressive.
But people don't know about this.
Yeah, it's a shame because I know we're partial because we're from Ohio, but we love the state and we're interested. That's kind of where our group focuses is stuff. I mean, I know, for the most of this episode, we've talked about kind of the big picture, but now I want to try to zero in on hometown. Like it's impressive to see things of that scale come out of a state that's often overlooked with everything, everything paranormal.
And the thing that, like in the Coyne incident, which happened in the 1970s, down by Mansfield, Richland County, I happen to live in Ashland County right next to it. Mm-hmm. And what really got my interest in that case was I go into work the next day. I'm working in a factory in the 1970s. I go into work the next day and somebody says, "Hey, did you see in the newspaper about UFOs, that we're only about 10 miles from here, like a thing of a helicopter." Well, when I looked up where it was at, my parents had a camper that they went to, and their camper was right within probably about 100 yards of where this thing was seen at.
Oh, that's great.
I'm like, oh, crap, man, I wish I'd have been there,
Right?
Yeah. I've never seen this thing, So I really got my interest. I read over a lot of stuff on it, and then, like a lot of us, we get away from things for years because, you get a career, you get kids.
Yeah.
And I'm at a point in life now where I'm retired. And to me, it's me time now.
So now it's prime time. Prime time to get back into it.
Prime time now. Exactly. I joke around. I said, I did 3 things. I said, first of all, I bought my Corvette.
There you go.
I had to get the Corvette. The Corvette got lonely, so I had to get the motorcycle to park next to the Corvette, to keep it
It's time to
company.
live a little bit. Treat yourself.
Yeah. And I said, let's do something that we got away from years ago. Let's get back into it. And that's why I got interested in MUFON and the Cleveland Ufology Project. And one of the things that I love to do now is I love to do historical research and go back and look at them with modern tools. But what was unique about the Coyne case was I was doing a talk over along Lake Erie, Huron area, during the summertime, and this guy attends a talk I'm at. We had like 50-some people in this meeting, and I'm doing a presentation on UFOs at the library, and the guy goes, "Hey, can you tell us about the Coyne incident?" I go, "Let me give you about 5-10 minutes on the incident." So I gave him a quick overview, and I said, "Did I answer your question, sir?" He goes, "Yeah, that was the way it happened." I'm like, "I don't know who the hell you are, guy, but you ain't getting out of this room without a more serious talk. I don't claim to be a genius, but come on. That was the way it happened." Well, I cornered him, and he was actually one of the crewmen on board the helicopter.
Wow. So with the Coyne incident, if you could get I am not too familiar with it, but you're saying I guess it was like military helicopter was involved?
Military helicopter. Yeah, what it does is it goes back. I'm going to pull out my cheat sheet, by the way, to remember the date.
Oh, yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, but it goes back to October 73, October 18th. What you had was a Army Reserve helicopter. Was based in Cleveland. They had 6 of them actually at that time based in Cleveland for my research. One of the helicopters went to Columbus. Not all the crewmen had to have medical exams, but a couple of them had to have some routine medical exams. They go down, they do the exams, they finish up about 10:30. They go back to Port Columbus, and that's where they departed from. They leave Port Columbus about 10:30, and they're flying back to Cleveland in a Huey. Now, a Huey has that distinct sound that you can hear miles away. It's got that thump, 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 thump. Well, they leave, clear sky, nice, cool night. I mean, visibility is probably 15, 20 miles easily. And they were flying along Route 71 because what they did is they used also degree visual flight rules. They had a direction on their compass, but they looked at the car lights on Route 71. So they're keeping east of 71 because once they get close to Mansfield, they know that there's Mansfield Lom Air Force Reserve Base there. They flew F-100 fighters at that time. Now they're flying cargo planes, but back then they wanted to make sure they were staying well away from the airport just because of safety reasons. So they're starting to gradually approach Mansfield when one of the crewmen looks out the back window, left-hand side, and he sees a red light that's non-blinking. The light's non-blinking, and it's moving the opposite direction you are. They're going kind of like north, actually kind of like northeast. It's heading south. Well, he doesn't say anything about it. Maybe it's a tower or something. Who knows? Well, about a minute and a half later, a crewman on the other side, and the first crewman's name was John Healy, by the way. He was actually a Cleveland policeman. The crewman on the right-hand side, his name was Robert Janicek. He looks out the window on his side, and he sees a red non-blinking light off in the distance. Doesn't think anything about it, does the double take. It's still there. Maybe it's a tower. I don't know. I better let the Commander Coyne know. So Commander Coyne wasn't flying. Lawrence Coyne was actually a full-time Army reservist. He was actually a former Cleveland policeman also. But he's in the front seat in the co-pilot side, just riding along for the ride, basically. So he says, Coyne, he says, there's an object I see off in the distance. I'm not sure what it is. It's red, non-blinking. Well, they know there's potential aircraft in the area coming into Mansfield. He says, keep an eye on it. Let me know if there's a change. Well, this is where all of a sudden you get this B-movie, Twilight Zone type thing, The thing turns and starts coming on basically about a 45-degree angle towards them. They estimated about 400 miles an hour. So this thing is coming in fast.
Coming in hot.
At their same altitude, which is about 1,500 feet. They're at 1,500 feet. This thing is coming at their same altitude. They're thinking collision.
Yeah.
So Coyne takes over control of the helicopter from the fourth crewman. His name was Rick Jesse. He puts it into a dive and says, okay, I'm going to get below this thing, whatever it is, and let me also radio Mansfield, which is the closest airport, and say, hey, have you got anything on radar? So he keys his mic up as he's putting into a descent, and he goes, this is 15444, which is their tail number. Mansfield, he said, ignition acknowledges, and then the radio goes dead. Nothing. He starts changing the frequencies, can't get anything. You can hear his mic keying up, but he's got nothing. This thing is coming at him. And he's almost thinking impact, so he puts in the steepest dive he can. And the last known altitude they had was 500 feet off the ground.
So they were really low.
They were low.
Really
at
low.
Night.
Yeah, that's dangerous. That's a dangerous maneuver, period, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the ground down there, by the way, is not completely flat. There's actually some hilly terrain in that region. So he's going down. Next thing you know, this object stops above them. They can see it's got like a red nose on it. The tail end looks kind of like a white light. It looks gray metallic, and they said it appeared to be roughly about 50, 60 feet long. It's, in some way they present it, some say it's out in front, but actually was more, from what one of the crewmen told me, was up and above them. Robert Janicek, I found out, lived only about 12 miles from me. He was the crewman in the back.
Front row
I've
seat.
tracked him down and had. I've just pulled up right before our talk tonight, a 3-hour tape I made with him, talking to him about the whole thing.
Now, is this Coyne incident? Is this the audio you had, or is that a different incident?
Well, this one is all audio.
Okay,
the interview
okay,
I did
gotcha.
was all audio. And I talked to him about it. He goes, "Yeah," he says, "Yeah, I remember that now." Once I started talking to him about the whole event, he says, "I blew it off in the back of my mind for like all these years." But he said, "I was afraid that thing was going to hit the damn rotor blades. It was that close."
Now, was it just did it do anything aggressive, or was it just observing?
Okay, now here's where it gets wild. The helicopter they called the greenhouse, the cockpit, because the upper glass was green. So if you had light coming in, it would actually illuminate everything as a green color. They said this light swung around, and some described as being green, actually illuminated the whole inside of the helicopter and overpowered the lights of all the instrument lights. Wow. It was that bright. It lit up the whole cockpit. So they're still moving forward at probably about 110 miles an hour, roughly, exposing the descent. This thing is above them close enough, from what Yanicek said, to hit the rotor blades. That's what scared the hell out of him. And he says, this illuminated the whole cockpit. We're focused on this green light and everything else. It stays on for about 30 seconds, then the light goes. And this object takes off going towards the northwest, which is kind of like at a 45-degree angle, can continue its path. Well, they look down, and all of a sudden they're at 3,500 feet.
So it had
So
pulled
now you
them
went from
500
feet
Up to
3,500 feet.
So that's really interesting, because I think I mentioned this on our call, but usually you would assume if something flew over the top of a helicopter, it would create kind of like a strange pressure situation. You would expect the helicopter to drop in altitude.
Yeah.
Kind of like
right.
being caught like a rotor wash or some kind of propulsion. But to be pulled up 3,000 feet, I mean...
Yeah, 3,000 feet.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
really bizarre.
And that was in 70, what did you say?
73.
73. So, like, in my opinion, it's still a recent thing. And, yeah, that is a utter shame that is not a more told story. That's a wild tale. And you met... How many of the people have you met involved?
I met two of the crewmen, and I did a TV series about it.
Wow.
One episode, and they actually reached out and they tracked. I knew where the third crewman was. The fourth is dead.
No.
But I knew where the third was, and they tracked him down.
Now, I remember you
And
saying
they
you
caught
also tracked down the helicopter.
Right. Because I'm like, wait a minute, here's this thing that the object leaves. Coincidentally, the next day, and I say coincidentally, they did magnaflux tests on the rotor blades looking for cracks. They were not special ordered. It was supposedly a routine test. The compass also failed, and they had to replace the compass. The radio was worked on, and the two crewmen I talked to said that basically the helicopter became a hangar queen after that. It had ongoing mechanical issues from there on out.
So something with the forces it was the other craft was exerting.
The RS and all
was
that.
Something along those lines caused an issue.
Now, have any of the crewmen had any weird health effects, or have they lived relatively normal lives, or?
Well, the one I talked to had the longest interview with, I found out he passed away about a year ago now. I didn't find out what he passed away from, but it seemed like here all these years later.
Yeah.
Seems like he had a normal life. But interestingly enough, I mean, they get back to Cleveland. Actually, when they landed at Cleveland, they're almost completely out of fuel, which was unheard of. They had alarms going off saying that they had 20 minutes of fuel left on the way back.
God.
And when they sat down, they had only like 5 gallons of fuel left in the Huey.
Whew.
They had no radio contact, and according to the crewman I talked to, he said security came out and said, "Who the heck are you guys landing? You've got no permission to land." Well, I asked a crewman, I said, "I got a question for you. This is questions coming from some research I did. Were you ever questioned by Coyne about having unusual dreams after this whole event happened?" And Yanicek looked at me and says, "Where the hell did you hear that from?" I said, "I have my sources." He said he did. He asked us if we had unusual dreams after the thing happened. And basically, it goes back to, did they have an encounter?
Like,
did you maybe have missing time?
Yeah, that was kind of my next question, is the whole missing time thing, because that, to me, that is, for me, that is almost as horrifying as experiencing an abduction, because with the missing time, it's personal. It's you wonder, like, well, what the hell happened to me? What was I doing? You know, it's and that is a common report thing. I had family members down in Kentucky that had their car was lit up by a bright light up in the holler, and car died, and not, you know, just a strange event, no missing time, but I think it was they supposedly, like, a town over, and this is just hearsay from family down there. The town over, someone was out, like, hunting or doing something, and was, you know, out in the woods by himself, and didn't get home till midnight, till dark. And you don't do that hunting. That's not, you know, how it goes. So, and his whole thing was, well, I was just walking around, and then all of a sudden you know, he's like, I didn't pass out. I don't remember anything. You know, I wasn't hurt, you know, and it's just, and it was immediately following their encounter with this bright light in their car. So to me, it's a scary thing. It's a scary thing when it becomes a personal encounter like that is different.
Well, supposedly that question came from the Surgeon General.
Supposedly.
Ooh.
So now you get
and then he was like,
military.
was the alien smoking cigarettes?
Also, the Surgeon General had no eyebrows and was 7 feet tall.
Yeah, exactly.
He was wearing a black fedora and trench coat.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you hear stuff like that, it's like, wow. But then, you know, the case kind of dies out, course of time. At that time, Alan Hynek, Project Blue Book was gone. Yeah. Alan Hynek was still involved with UFO research here in Ohio. Mm-hmm. He was the consultant to Project Blue Book. He looked into the case. I've actually got the audio where he was interviewing the crewman I tracked down back years ago. So I had a little bit more information there. One of his assistants actually wrote a book on the whole thing. She did a lot of research. She passed away about a year ago now. She did a ton of research on a case, and I started picking up, said, you know, the one thing is that helicopter. I love to fly. I love helicopters, love planes. I said, where is that damn thing? I said, what if the thing is close, and maybe I can get a way to access that thing?
Put it right next to the Corvette and motorcycle.
Corvette and the motorcycle.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, there we go. Didn't think about that. But I start going through the tail numbers through registrations. And I found out the helicopter is decommissioned 40 years after it's put in service. It was made in 1968. They decommissioned it in 2008. It was sent to Patrick Air Force Base down in Florida. Well, from there, it got basically reassigned another tail number, and they gave it to the Colombians as part of what they call Plan Colombia for drug trafficking raids. So they sent it down to there along with a number of other helicopters from the same era. I'm like, okay, so I know it's in Colombia. Well, then I find a report in a Chinese newspaper. Get this, Chinese newspaper that says this tail number went down with all souls on board.
Oh.
So I'm like, okay, crashed. Why? Did they know it had mechanical issues? So I started trying to reach out to the reporters down in the area. And coincidentally, I mean, I started researching this years ago. About 6 months ago, I had a Colombian media contact me about this. And they said, we understand you have information. Do you think this helicopter went down because of this UFO exposure?
Because it was compromised.
How the heck would I know?
It's impossible to know.
You know? But I said it was involved with a close encounter where it had, you know, mechanical issues. And I said, I suggest you look for the mechanical reports on the helicopter that you should have down here. And I never heard another word back. But what happened is the helicopter went out on a drug trafficking raid, basically. And from what I understand, it wasn't shot down by arms fire. It went down from mechanical issues. The big question is, what were they related to? That you don't know.
Yeah, and that's where you start getting into that. I mean, it's interesting. It's unfortunate.
It's a 40-year-old helicopter, also.
But it's interesting that you go. It just so happens that it was involved with this super significant UFO report.
It was noted to have mechanical issues. Post said event.
Exactly. So to me, that's just, I don't know. It kind of sucks too that the government would give. I know the government being the government, they probably care a little about it, but it's got to suck, losing something that has that kind of a connection.
It should be in Wright-Pat, right?
Yeah,
next to
that
the
thing should be.
SR-71.
Yeah, that thing deserves a front row seat at Wright-Pat. It can be what did you call it? A hangar queen. It can be a hangar queen right there.
Yeah. Well, I was driving by a AMVETS location. They had a Huey sitting in the front. I go up, I'm looking at the serial numbers on it and say, what if
you got to make sure.
Down? What if it's hiding in plain sight? Right here it is.
That's right.
So, but I found WikiLeaks documents too.
Oh.
And the WikiLeaks documents did not state that tail number went down. I mean, these WikiLeaks documents were documenting helicopters in service, helicopters out of service, how many hectares were being sprayed with basically defoliants to kill the plants down there. They had all this stuff documented, and they said this helicopter went down. They gave it the serial number. All 4 crewmen did on board, but all that month and the surrounding months, the one I was looking for wasn't documented. So it's like, did they not document it, or did it really go down? I don't know.
So, and especially, I mean, I don't want to degrade Colombia. It's not what I'm trying to do. But with a country that is involved in their magnitude of fighting a drug war and everything else, I'm almost certain record keeping is kind of lower on the priority scale.
Record keeping and helicopter maintenance might not be on their list of
exactly.
priorities.
They're like, oh, how long's it been since old Betsy had an oil change? They're like, she's fine, take her out.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Don't worry about all that duct tape. It's fine.
Ignore the paper clips. Just fly it fast.
But when you talk to the crew and you get their stories, and you really look at it, it's like, this was a serious encounter. And here, I mean, they document. I mean, they turn the report in the next day that says this is what happened. And when I talked to
the military turned it, who turned the report?
Yeah, that's a good question.
The crewman turned it into the military.
Okay.
The report on it, you can find it on the internet, that this is what they observed. And I asked the 2 crewmen I talked to, I said, does the government mind you talking about this? And their answer was, as long as I state exactly what happened. That an object appeared above, it basically came on an intersecting path with them. It was above them. This green light illuminated the whole helicopter, and it left. They said, as long as we state that. But then you have ground witnesses entering into the story. A number of ground witnesses confirming that there was the helicopter, there was the object, and they also said that the altitude was roughly about 500 feet from the helicopter.
That was probably a bizarre sight to see.
And especially what gets me is when you have reports that are they're irrefutable. You can't argue with it. You have the
mass witness.
Yeah, you have all of the military members of the aircraft. You have people on the ground. You have everyone correlating the story. So I feel like it kind of puts the government in this position to where they're like, well, shit. Go ahead and just tell your story. We can't really say anything else.
So right, and at that time you had this guy called Philip Klass, who was a skeptic, a debunker. And you have those in all fields of paranormal. Oh, yeah. And a guy comes out and says, well, I think it was a meteor. Wait a minute. The meteor
hovering over the helicopter.
The meteor goes south, makes a right-hand turn, comes back at a 45-degree angle, stops above them, takes them up 33,000 feet, and then leaves. Come on. Seriously?
Yeah, it just had to deflect off a couple satellites and... maybe a Boeing dropped a Boeing bomb that deflected it a little bit.
It has to have these insanely mathematically impossible circumstances to work out.
And I even got a call, it was about a year and a half ago now, from another guy in the military. He says, I think it was a meteor. Wait a minute. The meteor goes south, makes a right-hand turn, comes back at a 45-degree angle, stops above them, takes them up 33,000 feet, and then leaves. Come on. Seriously?
Yeah, it has to have these insanely mathematically impossible circumstances to work out.
And I even got a call, it was about a year and a half ago now, from another guy in the military. He says, I've got this guy I'm arguing with online. He says about this whole incident. He says that a refueling plane came down above the helicopter, and that's what happened. And I said, first of all, why don't you find out if refueling planes were refueling helicopters at the time?
Yeah, right.
This is a Huey. It didn't get refueled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not the type of helicopter to be refueled in air.
Right.
And I said the closest place was Columbus, but I said they refueled aircraft, not helicopters. And I said, as far as coming down above the helicopter, playing a joke on them, like the guy was also saying, seriously, you're going to come down to about less than 1,000 feet at night in a tanker aircraft?
Yeah.
Come on.
Good
Sounds
joke.
like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And lawsuits.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Exactly.
Article 15.
So what? So we have
Dishonorable
the
discharge.
right, we have the Coyne incident. What? Do you have any like I don't know any stored in your repertoire of knowledge that like around Cincinnati itself? Because that's where we're all from. So that would kind of interest the hell out of me and us. I hope. I don't know about these guys. You never know.
Well, the one, oh man, I didn't pull it up, of course, because the one I actually found was one on audio tapes. It was one on the other side of the state. But there is actually one involving supposedly searchlights down in Norwood.
Okay.
Norwood, Ohio, yeah.
It's really close.
This goes back longer than that. This goes back, I think, 1950s or something like that.
Wow.
Where they saw unusual lights down there. Now, one that we had come into MUFON, probably about 6 years ago now, was down one by Mechanicsburg.
Okay. Oh, you told me about this one. Yeah, I remember this.
Where the guy had, in this case, he was driving down the country road at night, comes around a corner, and this is where you look at the weird things. He said he sees a hexagonal shaped object setting on the road. Well, as he comes around, his headlights kind of illuminated. You can see it's hexagonal shaped. And he says the thing rises up. It's got lights on it, starts going down the road. So he starts following it the best he can through these country roads. I forget what road it was on down there. And he follows it for so many miles before eventually, he can't follow it any farther. Well, we put investigators down there. We were looking for soil samples. They could see where stuff was kind of like knocked down. But you couldn't say whether it was from this object or what, because we couldn't find any radiation on it. You couldn't find any marks from like pads of like something setting on the ground. Mm-hmm. But interestingly enough, we had another witness not far from there report a hexagonal shaped UFO.
And that's a weird, to me, that's such a unique shape to report.
Yeah.
Right. And that was within the same time frame?
That had to be about 6 years ago now, something like that.
Okay.
We had that one come in, but it was unique because we had more people down there just because of the fact of the potential landing, looking for radiation, other potential detectable things.
Like scorch marks or something like that? Or
yeah, that we couldn't find.
Okay.
There was nothing along those lines.
So we're talking about all the witnesses that saw the Coyne helicopter. And the story that you told me that really stuck out to me was the Trumbull County one. Because it was so well documented by so many reputable witnesses.
No, that's the one with the police, the audio, right?
Right, with the police.
Okay. Yeah, and that was one that was kind of wild because it actually kind of originated from down in your area. What happened is Kenny Young was a UFO researcher. He was a researcher, and he was looking into some cases, and there's a guy in this case called Leonard Stringfield. He was a UFO researcher who was really serious into stuff. I mean, he had these mammoth archives that he was collecting. And one of the reports that he got wind of was reportedly a crashed UFO down closer to Dayton, where reportedly the chief of police was involved, that this green object crashed in that area. So he's trying to do everything he can to dig it up. And the problem of Stringfield files is that MUFON has part of them now, but the other part the family has. And he didn't make everything public on stuff. You'd hear bits and pieces, but not everything. He'd put out these reports that had some stuff in, and that's where the guy got it from. So he thought, I'm going to see if I can dig up more stuff on this, So you have to picture the time frame. He's looking into this like in 1999. So we didn't have the internet access like we do now. Yeah. So he goes up and he contacts directory assistance. And directory assistance, he says, they said, who are you looking for? He says, well, I'm looking for Liberty Police Department. Well, Liberty is down in that region, in the Dayton area. Mm-hmm. So they give him the phone number, and he calls it up and gets a hold of the dispatch, and they say, yeah, this is Liberty. He says, I'd like to talk to you about this UFO incident that happened. And the dispatcher goes, oh, yeah, I was the dispatcher on duty that night. He goes, really? This is great. You know, he's thinking, oh, man, gold mine, baby. He goes, yeah, I'd like to talk to you about it. So the dispatcher started telling him about the incident. He's just making all of his notes and so forth. He goes, I'm going on for 2 weeks researching stuff, but he says, the story's not adding up. He says, it's not the same story that Stringfield had out there. It seems completely different. Well, then he finds out he didn't get connected to Liberty Police Department. He got connected to Liberty Township Police, which is by Youngstown, the other corner of the state. Yeah. And he stumbled into another case which was even more mind-blowing.
So he lucked out and then lucked out again.
Exactly. It's like, oh, come on.
He needs to go buy several lottery tickets.
We call that a synchronicity in this area of study.
So he writes up a report on this whole thing and puts it on his website. And he doesn't follow up anymore on it. You know, he just says, okay, this is what happened. Let's post it. And he says, out of the clear blue sky, gets an email that says, I noticed your report on the internet. And he goes, I work for the 911 call center in that region. And he goes, we started digging through stuff. And I asked anybody if they ever heard of this whole thing, because we're curious about it, you know. Well, nobody had heard initially about the UFO thing over by Youngstown. But he says, as we dug into the 911 tapes, we found it. And what they found was basically the tapes. And they sent him a thing saying, yeah, we've got the tapes. I work for the call center. He verified that the guy worked for the call center, by the way. So he wasn't just being fed a line of bull. And he gets this letter saying, you know, be prepared. You're going to be getting something in the mail. And he watches for the mail. And next thing you know, he gets this package and opens the package up, and here's a 911 tape. And what's really wild about the story is it was wrapped in basically paper. And what they'd done is they'd taken newspaper articles, clipped them out like a ransom note. And they wrote out this note that basically said, be prepared for the real thing. Oh, you have the 911 tape.
Now this is setting up to be some almost Hollywood-esque stuff. This is
really setting the stage.
This is intense.
Exactly. And he based the date on the newspaper clipping, which was like December 14th of 94. So I tell people this is probably the approximate date because you can't say for sure. But he's basically being warned that, you know, hey, be prepared. You're going to be shocked from what you hear. Well, what we're going to try to do, I've never done this before, so we're going to find out. The audio is available, by the way, on the internet. You can find it. There's like 3 or 4 different sections, I think, of the tapes.
We'll try to link.
Put
a link on our video for that.
You can find them.
And what I did is I cut down some of the segments because actually the tapes, we understand, were taken over a couple days. And you had UFOs primarily, they said, on one night, but actually it was over multiple nights.
Oh, I didn't know that.
In the area. And what you hear is this thing go from let's say a call coming in by an individual to the dispatcher, and the dispatcher responding like, UFO. You're right. And that's what they're thinking. But then as the calls progress, you see this whole big change, like I was talking to Dylan about.
You see the mood shift. You see
Exactly. Like, this is not fun and games anymore. So let's see what happens. Hopefully this will come through good.
Did you get any reports or any objects in the air about 15 minutes ago?
Somebody called in, but I really don't know what that would be.
It was very strange.
Okay.
Looked like a back end of like one of them fighter planes, you know, like the plane coming out the back.
Okay. Was it just like moving at a slow rate of speed?
It wasn't a slow rate, it was a fast rate, but it was coming down.
It was coming down?
Yeah.
Like straight down or at an angle?
Like an angle.
At an angle? Okay.
I mean, it wasn't real big in the back.
Okay.
Plane.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll check with the air base in Vienna and see if they have any report of anything in the area.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. 996.
Now she seems just so matter of fact.
Yeah,
you know,
you can hear it at the end, especially when she's like, "Okay, we're gonna check it." You know what I mean? That reassuring, "Oh yeah, we're gonna look into it, honey," kind of thing. You know.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to key up another one. I'm sorry about that.
So what he was describing didn't sound particularly UFO-esque, right? Because he said there's a flame out of the back, it's descending at an angle. But I guess as we go along, these become more and more interesting, a little bit more.
Yeah, and some of the audio is kind of garbled, so I kind of edited the tapes down quite a bit. But you're right. I mean, he's on this area called Sampson Drive. I went out and I had to check it out too. And back in the 90s, basically you had houses about 100 feet or so back from the road. It's a nice area, kind of more like a developing suburban area is what it would really amount to back in the 90s. So he sees this thing and he calls it in. We had a couple other witnesses also calling in right after that, seeing a green light out on Sampson Drive. Now, he said it kind of looked like it almost had like a light coming off of it like an aircraft, like an engine exhaust. Other ones were reporting it just as like a green light that they were seeing out there. But they're saying it looked to be like 50 feet off the ground. So it was low, whatever it was.
Really low.
So I mean, here you get these calls coming in. She gets like 3 or 4 in a row. Matter of fact. Then she reaches out and contacts, basically it had to be her captain.
County Dispatch.
Okay.
Bob, I swear to God, 4 calls in on an unidentified object over Liberty.
4 calls.
4 calls on an unidentified flying object.
Run down, take a look. All right, let's check it out.
You want me to call the air base and see if there's anything in the area?
We'll take a look.
I swear to God. You want to hear the call?
Come out here and show you.
You want to hear the call? Wait a minute, I'll let you hear the call. Maybe you think I'm lying.
I believe you.
No, I swear to God.
Yeah, so you could definitely hear her her tone changing, her demeanor getting a little bit more.
They've lost all their professional demeanor.
Yeah, now it's like
poise.
hey, dude, you got to go check this shit out now. You got to. We need to do something now. That's
so he
impressive.
goes out and he starts checking the area out. So also you have to picture in the back of your mind, not only is he getting that, but also all the other patrolmen on duty that night are hearing the same thing.
Yeah.
You also have people with scanners. Think about the time frame.
Right.
People, police scanners in their house. People, the news crews.
Oh yeah,
with scanners.
My dad was
everything
obsessed with police scanners.
Yeah.
And so I remember hearing every little thing that ever happened in my neighborhood. And it was cool, but I can only imagine people sitting there, after dinner or during dinner, just listening to something, in their basement, and all of a sudden, boom, UFOs. Get out in your front yard,
Well, I'm a news photographer for a living, so I listen to the police scanner all night long. And I know if I heard I heard UFO on the police scanner, I'd be flooring it.
He's grabbing his jacket and his camera, and he's getting in the old Malibu and hitting it hard.
That's right.
So now you've progressed from like 4 or so phone calls to captains notified. He's going out starting to patrol this region around Sampson Drive, looking for whatever it is. Next thing you know, she gets a call from Channel 33, which is a local news channel. Mm-hmm. So let me pop that one in.
This really is like the order that it would really, it happens in.
Dispatch, may I help you?
Hi, dear. This is Stacy from 33.
Hi, Stacy. How are you?
I got one of your...
Did you really?
This woman was almost...
Serious. Hi. She saw something. She told me that the area was like Sampson Drive. There's a vacant field midway through the block. They're telling me this too, but I mean, it's probably some weather balloon or something. You know what I mean? They're checking the area, but these UFO calls are getting out of hand. I don't know what it is. If it was, what the hell did they come to Liberty for? There's no intelligent life in Liberty. Come on. We're telling everybody they're doing a sequel to what's that new Star Trek movie, Generation? Bluish green, no noise. It was low flying and took off. Oh, come on. Fifth Avenue. Are you serious? It's driving up Fifth Avenue Extension. Now, oh, Christ. Not driving. It's flying. It came down and just zooped over it with a big glowing object. Wow, we got 4 calls on it. The last guy said it was a fighter plane.
Fighter plane.
To me, it's as interesting as it is kind of a little sad. As you hear her going, it's probably a weather balloon. And they're laughing about it, and I'm like, man, it sucks. It's comical to not hear it.
Well, it goes back to exactly what we're talking about, where people are just like, they don't want to admit to themselves. No, they don't. Yeah, they do not. They don't want on the radio the inward acceptance of I just saw some shit. They don't want that. They don't want that on them. And they kind of have like a responsibility, I guess, to the people calling in, because they can't be like, yes, there's a UFO.
Hide your kids, hide your wife. Yeah. It's abducting people out here.
Get in your bathtub, lock the door.
Put on your tinfoil hats.
Yeah, get ready.
There's nothing in the 911 dispatch book that says like what to do in case of UFO.
Yeah, see, to me, it's like in modern times is like I feel like we've kind of built also the kind of panic around UFOs now, because like most people have seen the movie Signs. You know what I mean?
Man.
And when that movie came out, I was just old enough to still be freaked the hell out by it. And so like my mind goes to, if in the comical realm, my mind goes to Will Smith, Tommy Lee Jones, Men in Black,
of course.
But then it also goes like Signs, swing. You're
Predator.
Fighting an alien in your living room with a baseball bat. And to me, to the recording, like you hear them joking about it. You hear the people that their job is to report, what's going on and everything. You hear them joking about it, but you hear
it's nervous laughter.
Yeah, but you hear the people calling in. Mm-hmm. Their demeanor's not laughing.
Right.
They're not joking.
Right. They seem scared.
Yeah. So
they are, and you love the next part. It keeps picking up.
Oh yeah.
Because I mean, here you've had people calling in the police department. You have people calling Channel 33, saying they're seeing something that's all in the same region. Well, she reaches out to air traffic control. This part is great.
Oh, God.
You're going to love this. So let me see if I can pull that one up. This is a tiny bit longer clip.
Yes, sir. This is Ryan from Liberty Township Police Department in Yeston, Ohio. Yeah. We have reported some flying object in our jurisdiction, in our area, above the Sampson Drive, Fifth Avenue extension area. I could not give you any kind of traffic, direction that would help you know that area. Do you know of anything that should be in our airspace this time, close to the ground? This is not a prank phone call, I swear. You can call me back and verify.
Look at the radar scope, and I go 60-mile diameter of Youngstown, and there is nothing out there.
Oh, shit.
Not even anything else high.
We've got five accounts, 5 calls in on this.
Yeah.
Something's flying in our area, and it's low to the ground. Would you be able to monitor like a Cessna or something with a light on it?
Well, if it was, do you mean visibly?
No, with the radar.
With the radar, it depends on how high it is and where they are. If it's low radar coverage, so there isn't any.
Okay, now I have to go over here and tell them something, and I don't want to say you couldn't find anything. Is there any?
Is exactly what we're talking about.
We want to give them answers. We want to tell them something.
Or something that might be used at night or something.
Could be. It just could be anything. As far as about any kind of helicopter traffic or anything down low. They don't have any kind of requirements to.
It made no noise.
Unless they're coming into the airport here.
Okay, so you have no communications with helicopters. It could be something like that.
That could be a helicopter.
Okay.
The helicopter's particularly flying
Okay.
low.
All right, I'm buying this 100%. But
Are you? Is that location anywhere near a hospital?
we are close to a hospital, but the location is away from. It's as low as they said it was to the ground. It would be approximately 5 miles away from the hospital. We're closer to that end of town. Is closer like out towards the Vienna line, Vienna Air Base area, and that's what I thought maybe it was related to.
Yeah, we haven't had anything going on. Nothing coming from that direction.
Okay.
Half an hour ago.
Then I'm gonna repeat. Okay.
Guys just go out here northbound, climbed up high, and nothing's going on around here.
Okay, I am going to advise you of this. You could take it and file it in your G and in your garbage bin if you want to.
Oh God. That's it.
Don't you love it?
Oh God.
And just like that, the dispatcher had to change her pants.
Yeah.
You know?
I just love when
I'm
she's
just-
oh shit.
Yeah, I'm just glad they didn't hit him with the, well, she hit the people with the weather balloon, the old
She did
tired
bring
weather
up the
balloon,
weather
and
balloon.
then, but you have what's the other one? Swamp gas. I don't know. There's a bunch of stereotypical responses of
Bear. Yeah, it's a bear.
that's my favorite one, and we kind of use that as a
Bigfoot.
joke. We kind of use it as a joke. 'Cause in Bigfoot, every Bigfoot sighting's a bear. Everything's a bear, and I don't know, Tom, have you ever seen a bear?
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, it could have been a Bigfoot,
You don't know?
but it was probably a bear. I mean, it's comical. But I'm sure with you being this heavily involved in, especially MUFON. I mean, I'm sure you have heard every single official excuse you can think of.
And then some.
So what's give me entertain us for a second. What is the most colorful excuse?
I love it when people say, it had to be Venus. Then
A whole nother
I'm
planet.
I'm like, don't you people pull up astronomy software? And I mean, I'm part of an astronomy group. I've got software can replicate the sky going back to whatever time frame, and it shows me what planets and everything should be there.
Where the placement of everything at that time.
Did it move
Exactly,
faster
like,
than
there's nothing-
8 degrees per hour?
Yeah.
Venus zooming across the sky.
I mean, you love Venus, and the swamp gas one was the killer years ago, and really that one got blown out of proportion because Alan Hynek was with Project Blue Book, and he was just really, they were searching for any possible explanation.
Which I can understand.
And when he says swamp gas could, but I think he knew in the back of his mind, no, it's not in this case, but that's what different ones ran with.
It's like that, and another one I've heard repeatedly in stories is ball lightning. And ball light, I mean, and ball lightning alone is interesting as hell because it's a weather phenomenon that's not really. It's kind of speculated to exist.
It's elusive.
Yeah, it's a very elusive,
Right.
hard thing to. We know it's possible, but catching it is a thing. Catching it in action.
It's like catching lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, so but I mean, they like to throw that excuse around, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of the UFO footage is amateur footage of a ball lightning incident, but for people like this to throw around like the stereotypical excuses and to not take it seriously, that to me, like it bums me out. You're like,
They're just hunting for something.
yeah.
To grasp on.
And the skeptics out there will keep hunting no matter what, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
If you explain away one of the reasons, they're going to find another one to go after.
Yeah.
So it's a battle you can't win, I've learned.
Yeah.
So I don't worry about convincing the skeptics. I just present the information as I find it, and I'm like, this is what I roll with,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like in this case, I mean, she's talking to air traffic control, and she's looking for an explanation to tell her supervisor.
Right.
Basically.
I don't want to get in trouble for this one.
Well, what happens as the whole thing progresses? Now you've got basically boots on the ground. You've got officers in a region calling in. They're trying to get as much information as possible because people are still seeing it out in this area.
So how long you said this incident was like over a couple days
few
span?
days.
A couple days, but a lot of it, I think, focused over like one night.
Okay.
So when I'm putting these clips out there, they're not like continuous, like minute after minute. They're actually spread out time frame. And the problem is when a tape came out, you don't know what's already been edited.
True.
As far as time frames. It's already been cut around and stuff
now,
like that.
was the tape that the guy received, had that been messed with at all, or?
It didn't appear to be messed with, but again, you don't know exactly what segment you're looking at. And the other thing is they pointed out that they're monitoring a number of different radio frequencies at the same time. So you've got different departments in the area that have their transmissions going on. And I think at this point they said there were roughly maybe about 14 different police department and officers aware of this whole thing going on, and different ones are contacting each other back and forth. I see something over here. I see something over there. And I think also what you've got is a little bit of, again, that term I used earlier, mass hysteria going on.
Yeah.
That now people are seeing more things because you've got officers going out by the air base. They're approaching security at the air base saying, hey, do you know of anything going on out here? And the one that I want to play for you next is actually one of the officers that went out to the sighting area.
Oh, yeah. This one's good.
And what he does is he talks about some of the stuff, but you don't know the whole thing that went on. So the officer's name is Toby Malero, and he was still, to my knowledge, on duty in the area.
Mm-hmm. It's impressive.
Oops. Fat fingers. Wrong one.
Your phone.
It happens.
Bach. Let's try again.
Still Sanford, Fifth Avenue.
We're right there. I don't see anything up in the air now. How long ago did these calls come in?
This just in within 2.
This is air radio. 98 radio.
Dead.
If you get any more calls, try to get an address. I'd like to speak to the people making the calls, please.
Copy.
Radio.
Not any good.
We'll be out of service for a few minutes. I have to gather my thoughts.
Now, here's what happened that they didn't talk about in the 911 tapes. Officer Malero was number 98. He's driving down Sampson Drive, and he sees a bright red light. Now, they portrayed it in some of the TV shows. There's been a couple of shows that featured this, UFO Hunters, and another one did it. But again, like we were talking earlier, they took some, let's say, artistic liberties.
As they do.
In their description. He sees this bright red light that's so intense that he can't, look directly into it. It's also illuminating the whole area around there. This light is. The light comes over him. His cruiser dies. So the lights go out, engines off, everything. He's sitting there, seeing this light. The thing passes by. Then he's able to restart his car. The lights evidently come back up. Radio comes back up. And he's sitting there trying to rationalize what in the heck just happened.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why he said, I need a minute to get my senses back.
Well, I can only imagine you just that's the thing is when people have these experiences, you are seeing something. Paranormal experiences in general, you're seeing something that you have your entire life been told, no, that doesn't exist.
And it's kind of ineffable. You don't have anything to compare it to.
Yeah, there's no connection you can make to any other experience in your life.
Right. Is that something people report a lot? I've heard people before talk about the actinic rays, or like a welding light, almost like an arc light coming from a UFO, like so intense that it can actually damage their vision. Yeah,
there's been some of them, and there's a couple of them that come to mind. Is one of the other ones that we won't get into tonight, but there's one in Portage County that when you see the movie Close Encounters, where Richard Dreyfuss is chasing the UFO down the road. You see the bright light illuminating the whole road as it's going over, and he had him at the railroad crossing with the light. That actually is based on Portage County in 1966. That's where Spielberg got the idea from.
Oh, right.
Two deputies were out, and this object came at them from a distance, came over them as they're checking out a car. Illuminate the whole area, and one of the officers said that basically it was like looking at the gates of hell. The light was that intense above.
Yeah, Spielberg was from Dayton.
Yeah, I know so Spielberg's a local boy.
Heavily influenced by those stories.
There's so many more. There's so many more things I could talk about. There's so many more things I could talk about with you, Tom.
Oh,
we definitely have to try to do another one because that just opens up another whole realm, and it's just that's what gets me when you dabble in the UFO stuff. The sheer amount there is to discuss it's unlike any other. I mean, when you talk about the ghost stuff, the cryptid realm of stuff, there's a lot, but you get into the UFO and you start talking about globally, you're talking about millions and millions of reports just from every walk of life, every aspect you can think of.
For as long as recorded history.
Yeah, and it's I mean, I applaud MUFON for what they've been doing, trying to catalog it, but that is I'm sure that you've experienced, that's a daunting task to try to just, climbing Everest seems like a weekend vacation when compared to compiling all the UFO reports.
But that's nothing. The group I'm with of researchers, I've got, I don't know, about 4 terabytes of information stored on my one hard drive. And what they're doing is you had UFO groups going, let's say, back to 1940s, 1950s, after the subject started becoming known. Groups forming around the state. You had some in southern Ohio. You had some up by me. The Cleveland group actually has been around since 1952.
Wow.
So, I mean, a long time. And over the years, think about these people involved.
Yeah.
You've got some people getting UFO reports from individuals. They're writing them on papers, notes, and stuff like that. And actually, one of the ones to first create a report, the report process, and Project Blue Book used it, was Battelle Institute down in Columbus.
So Ohio's been involved for quite a while.
They were
quite a while.
And I told Dylan that Battelle Institute, by the way, used to really got their start in like metallurgy. Then they're more of like, I think you could describe more as a think tank group now. But they've been involved with UFOs for years down in that area.
It's incredible.
Something we need to look into. He was telling me about that.
It's incredible.
But all these reports, think about this. I mean, over time, you've got people who die, people pass away, and if they don't know who to pass this stuff on to, it gets thrown in file 13.
Yeah,
right.
So who knows how much research information, journals. I've got journals up the wazoo, and my garage is half UFO documents.
And that's kind of that's a thing is like, I don't want to say it's become less. I mean, ufology. I mean, I think stuff's gotten more popular, but it's more popular just for the watching of it, the entertainment of it, the actual like boots on the ground, people actively involved in it has, from what I've seen, kind of started dropping off. Is when we would go to our Bigfoot events, you would see older folks, not many people my age at the time in there. And that's what, you kind of get, especially when I was involved, you kind of get, hazed a little bit coming into it. But then, because they were like, oh, we don't get a lot of new members, we got to have fun.
People are interested but not involved.
Yeah. So I feel like that has got to change. And that would be a cool kind of thing for us. I think that's kind of a goal we haven't really acknowledged, is to like, this stuff has to get out more into the mainstream. It has to be talked about more. It has to actively be put out there more, because like for people like you, like you're saying, you got half a garage full, you got terabytes of information. There is, and that's just you. You know what I mean?
And that's nothing. The group I'm with, the one individual had a basement of his house that was not small. It was like an old century home with an addition. That was full. That was full. And by the way, it's a lot of it, I think, is some of the stuff is being, not of all of his stuff, but some of the other research stuff is being sent to a guy out in New Mexico area, Dave Marler, who's a great researcher. He's putting up whole sections just to store this stuff because, again, if nobody takes it, what's going to happen to it. And there's so much resource material there.
Yeah.
Just like the Coyne tapes. I found the Coyne tapes in the research group I'm with. One of the guys had them in his collection. He shared them with me. And when I was looking for correlating cases of that Coyne case, a friend of mine in the astronomy group told me, he says, back in the 1980s, I think it was, he says, I turned a report into some guy at a shopping mall. The guy had a UFO display. He was collecting reports. So I told him about seeing the UFO back then. I went through my archives and I found his report. Because the person who originally took it, his stuff got passed down to me and other researchers. And here was that case. And I said, here it is. There's my friend's name, along with several others. So, I mean, it's good to have this archival material like that.
And it's crucial to the well-being of the whole study itself. It's crucial to keep, almost in a sense of to kind of remember where you came from, kind of thing. We have to remember the starting points of this whole thing, because, like you said, like in the Cleveland, you said it started in 1952.
Yeah,
and so that, to me, that is a impressive amount of time that people have been, willingly and openly looking into these incidents.
It's important to digitize those documents and make a database
stuff,
that's
searchable.
searchable.
Stuff that needs to be preserved, because that's as much, to me, as much history as anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's why I like to collect this stuff and then pass on what I've got, because I digitized a lot of stuff I have and passed it on to the other group on there, these old reports and stuff.
Right.
Because maybe somebody will find some value in them like I did.
Oh, absolutely, and that's it. It has to be preserved, because we got to look back on it and laugh when the aliens take over the world, and
they're
gonna be like, we were telling you the whole time, you didn't see it.
Somebody's got to be like, hey, we tried to warn you.
Told you.
Exactly.
I mean, here's the Randy Quaid character in Independence Day, Told you.
Living in his RV out in the desert, being like, I told you guys. I told you guys.
But getting back to that Ravenna case, though, I mean, you had a deputy. Here he sees this thing's up close. He freaks out. He gets his senses, and when you start listening more and more to the tapes, there are police officers out by the airport again. They're talking to the air traffic controllers. They're still trying to find explanations. Now, some of the guys are seeing stars, because I pull up my astronomy software, and where they're describing seeing like star-like lights at, you had Sirius and Vega on that same night. So I think some of that stuff is carrying over. But nonetheless, when you see stuff like the officer said, he even saw something 50 feet off the ground. Here you've got, to me, somebody who's, a trained observer who should be able to maintain his composure in a situation like this. That he's got to get some time out to get himself back together.
When someone that is used to that line of work asks for a moment, it's something rather serious happened.
Yeah.
So to me, and it's I don't know if that guy's still around to talk to, but that would be one hell of an interview to have.
He's on duty.
Oh, is that the one that's still on duty?
Yeah, he's on duty over there, to my knowledge, because I was a executive director at the university before I retired, and I'm going in our lobby the one day, passing through our lobby, and I see these gumball machines out there. I'm like, who the heck put these gumball machines out there? And my secretary goes, well, they belong to some policeman. Really? She goes, yeah, here's his card. It's the guy. And I could never corner him. And I had to call a couple times to the police department over there, and I couldn't get a hold of him. It probably said there's probably a UFO guy on the line or something like that, Yeah. But I would like to sit down and talk to him and filter out, the difference between fact and fiction on what's been presented on some of the shows, and fill in questions that I have personally about the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Because one of the things, I'll just play one more tiny clip just to kind of finish this one up for you.
Sure.
But this is one where it goes back to dispatch. I think it's kind of a good way to sum it up. That here she's had these calls coming in all this time. And she's got to figure out what to do with all this stuff.
I logged it. I knew this is coming back up. I knew everybody and their brother's going to be calling tomorrow. And I'm like, I logged it.
I saw it. Oh my God.
No, I didn't like you saw it.
They're going to be calling.
But you know what? They'll be pulling that tape. We're all going to get our asses shucked. You watch federal government will come on here and go, okay, we're going, oh, little green men, Santa Claus, flying Christmas tree, all this shit on the channel. We're all going to get our asses in a grinder. Maybe I want So, I don't know.
Christmas
If it was a UFO, it's logged, you know.
I think that's kind of a good way to sum it up.
At
Just
least
threw her
she-
hands up.
At least she kept her humor.
She just threw her hands up.
She was like,
whatever.
"It is
I'm
what
going
it
to log it under
is."
flying Christmas tree.
She's like, I'm not paid enough for this.
Yeah. But, you've got, and these are just a few events we've talked about tonight, There's so many around the country that when you start looking at them, somebody can say, yeah, there's been a couple major cases that, no, I think there's an explanation behind it. But there's other ones when you start digging into it, I'm like, I think there's way more here than what is on the surface. Because, like, by being involved in paranormal, you've probably talked to witnesses out there about Bigfoot, bears, the bears. And you start talking about one event and you find out that there's actually something that happened to them that's even way more interesting than something that they're talking about right then.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Let me tell you about this other experience I had.
Well, that's the thing is once you get them to open up about one small thing, I feel it bridges that level of trust, and then they're like, oh well, here's this other thing.
Well, it seems like some people just kind of attract things like that. Some people are more susceptible to that stuff.
No, there's definitely there seems to be people like that just tend to experience weird shit, and that's just the way it seems that their life is played out. You see people that have like that seem to gravitate, or seem to have this pool of weird happenings in their life, and like we've had. I know I've talked to people before that were like, oh, they've seen tons of lights in the sky. They've seen this and this, and you don't know what they've truly seen. But then you have people like with the ghost stuff. They've had numerous paranormal encounters. The Bigfoot stuff. They've had numerous things happen. And I mean, yeah, you should never trust blindly. Take it for a grain of salt. But you can. I don't. I know for me at least, you can tell when someone's being sincere, and when you get that feeling of this person's not trying to pull the wool over my eyes and lie to me and tell me stories. These people were affected by what they experienced and what they've continued to experience, and there's that level of weird to it, man. And everything everything paranormal, and I use that blanket term, but everything paranormal. There's you have people in the field that are that seem to be in the right place at the right time frequently. And is that just a chance? Is that just lucky or unlucky circumstance, or is there something behind it? Like with people that like it's somewhat like abduction cases. People seem to be almost targeted for a reason. Starts at childhood and continues through their whole life. So you have to think if there is reasons that we do not understand currently that cause that, that have led to that. So it's a vast thing to kind of wrap your head around. It's a very big subject.
Well, that's something that I told Dylan about. That what also got me reinterested in the whole subject of UFOs years ago is because I had my own encounters back in the 1960s.
This is the origin story that I was telling you about.
The origin of Thomas.
I love your story.
This gets lengthy, by the way. If you really got into the whole thing, this would be a whole nother show of where it all came from.
Is this one I hear is a little bit cryptid based?
Well, yeah, this is the one that it kind of shocked me when it came back around.
Yeah.
Just to kind of make it short, I didn't live in Ohio my whole life. I lived in South Carolina for about 5 years. We moved down there when my family was, I think I was like in the 5th grade, something like that. And we lived in 2 different areas, and they're both out in the rural areas. The second one we lived at was out in a rural area where you had peach orchards all around you. You had peach orchards, you had kudzu vines, which is a heavy foliage on the ground, that there's no way you can run through that crap, you know? Well, we had a few houses around us, and I made friends with a kid across the street. He was basically 2 years ahead of me in school. We hung out together because there was a whole lot around here. And we developed some habits. One is hunting. Yeah. And I use the term loosely. Hunting was basically going out in the woods with shotguns and killing abandoned refrigerators.
That's my kind of hunting.
You had some shooting.
Anything that didn't move, that was an abandoned appliance, abandoned car, that's what we shot, you know. We didn't kill animals. We just shot up anything we could find.
It's a wild Maytag.
Yeah. Don't let it get away.
Been tracking it for hours. Look out, it's coming right for us.
It's coming right for us, yeah.
Exactly. Although one day, I forgot to tell you, Dylan, I'm going through this peach orchard, and I stop, and I look down, and there's a rabbit between my feet.
Oh, God.
And my buddy says, shoot it. Are you freaking serious? 6 inches away from a 12 gauge.
Wasn't much rabbit left.
I'm not going to roll those dice.
No.
I killed the rabbit and dug its grave in the same shot.
No, that rabbit lived to see another day. It ran off, and I couldn't quit laughing afterwards.
You'd be wearing that rabbit.
But we're going out to the peach orchards, and we go out to the woods deeper and deeper. It was on a Sunday afternoon because there's a bright sky out. Bright sunny sky, perfectly clear. We're going back into the woods, and we're going deeper and deeper, just basically just killing time. As we get way back in the woods, I don't know how far we got back in the woods at this point. He's 15, I'm 13. He looked at me and says, "You notice anything wrong?" "What are you talking about, man?" He goes, "Listen." I said, "I don't hear anything." He goes, "That's the problem, man. I don't hear nothing." So, I mean, we start listening, and then you don't hear birds, you don't hear squirrels, anything that would normally be out. There's nothing. It's dead silent. And he starts walking deeper and deeper into the woods. And we're back in there, and he goes, "You know there's a swamp willie back here, don't you?" "Swamp willie? What the hell are you talking about, swamp willie?" And he's basically describing Bigfoot. So in my mind, I'm thinking campfire story. He's trying to scare the heck out of me, you know? Mm-hmm. I said, "I ain't afraid of no swamp willie, man. I got a 12 gauge. I'll take its ass down, you know?" Reality is I dropped a gun, ran out of the woods.
Exactly.
You know? But we get farther back in the woods, and instead of going out of the woods, I mean, he's getting scared. He's really getting terrified. And I'm watching his body language. And he's picking his pace up. He's starting to run, not walking. But he's going deeper into the woods and not away from the woods. Well, I look up at the same time, and I see a UFO hovering above us. This was treetop height, silver disc that it wasn't like an egg, but more like rounded edges, not like two dishes together. Not like that, but it's more like rounded all the way around the edge. And I'm looking up at this thing, and it's like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. Well, we keep walking deeper into the woods, and I never tell him to look up. He's going deeper. He's picking his pace up. I'm watching this UFO follow us. I'm looking up, looking down, looking up, looking down. It's following us as we're going deeper into the woods. Eventually get to the point, I don't know why, but I just didn't see the object anymore. It was gone. We get out to a road, if that's what you want to call it. Actually, it's a dirt road that had like some oil sprayed on it to keep the dirt down. That's how rural the area was.
That's some old school methods right there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Old school methods. We're walking back, and he says, "There's a big ass white owl in front of us." I said, "What are you talking about, a white owl, man?" He said, and he holds his arm out like at 4 feet high, and he says, "It was this tall standing in front of us." I said, "I didn't see no owl. Are you crazy, man? I didn't see no owl. There was a white owl standing in front of us, man, and he couldn't stop." Over and over and over as we're walking back this road, the whole way back, he's talking about the white owl. That totally freaked him out. He says, "That big black eyes, man, was standing right in front of us." Well, I never told him about the UFO that was hovering above us the whole time. I never said a word, never ever mentioned that to him. We eventually get back to the house, our houses, and he's like, "Yeah, there's this big white owl." Well, I didn't think a whole lot about it. But it was after that time frame I started having very intense bouts of sleep paralysis. Matter of fact, they actually started right before that, but they really intensified sleep paralysis,
which is
almost like out-of-body experiences. Yeah. And I kind of blew the whole thing off. I just kind of forgot about it. But then, I don't know if I told you about did I tell you about the car incident, Dylan?
Yeah, you did. But these guys haven't heard it.
Yeah. We have this car that starts coming down the road, that starts pulling in my drive every night. Now, he lived across from me. This car would pull in my drive every night, and back then you could tell cars apart. Yeah. I'm like, that is a Ford. That's not just a Ford, that's a Ford Galaxy, about a 1966. It's pulling into my drive, shining lights right in my house every night. Well, my mother, who was there, my dad worked a lot of nights. She wouldn't call the police. She wouldn't call the sheriff. My buddy, his dad actually worked in corrections, but they never did anything. And he even came over to my house. We were outside a few nights when the thing actually pulled in and shined its light up. And we're standing right in the front yard. Well, we'd do the same thing. Shine its lights, look at us, back, wait, and take off. Well, shortly after that time frame, we decided to walk up and get a soda one night. Well, the gas station's about a half mile up the road. Here it's at night. No moonlight. I was just all starlight. We get up there, we get some sodas, we're walking back down this dirt road, basically, and we hear a car coming behind us. Turn around, no headlights, but we can see a silhouette of a car. So we run off into the peach orchard, getting off the road as far as we can, go into the peach orchard, and the car swerves towards us, up in as far as it can get to the peach orchard. Unless it went to the tree, it can't go any farther in, so it's got to swerve back onto the road and takes off. Never saw it again that night, but it came after us that night. Now you could say, probably some drunks out, drinking beer or something like that, headlights off, just, whatever. I mean, we used to go out hunting sitting on the front of cars.
Oh, yeah.
Headlights on with the dogs out. We had beagles we'd try to chase rabbits up, which we never shot because they moved.
We were born in the wrong time, boys.
Right. But, it was not long after that time as my dad transferred from the company in South Carolina. We moved back to Ohio. The sleep paralysis still kept staying there. I had tons of more stuff we can't get into happening at the same time. And I always wondered what happened to my buddy after that. I tried to track him down for years, and eventually, and it was only about a month ago now, I tracked him down. He died 2 years after we moved, and he was killed by a car.
Ooh. Wow.
That's heavy.
Well, then if we want to leave it as a mystery, I have an experience that ties with the whole owl thing, ties kind of into that. If we want to leave that for another time, you open to a part 2 eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think it's a great place to end.
Leave it on a good
began.
Little cliffhanger, and let's end it where you began. Yeah, that's cool, man. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you, man. I had a blast.
Thank you so much.
Are definitely one of the most interesting people I've ever had the pleasure of talking to, no doubt.
Very much so.
I appreciate that. Tell my ex-wife that, would you?
We'll make sure to tag her.
Yeah, we'll tag her in it. We'll send her the video. But man, absolutely. Thank you for this. I mean, hell of a time, hell of a ride, man. Great time.
Coming away with a lot of things that we need to look at.
Yeah, that just
I'm humbled by my ignorance on the subject.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Right.
You go, man.
There's so much I can learn from you guys too, because we also get cryptid stuff occasionally come into MUFON.
Oh,
let us know.
In the past, they did look at
we
that
love
stuff.
that. We love that stuff too. We're into it, man. Into it all. But yeah,
I've been down in your regions like Salt Fork.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Doing investigations down there.
Something in the water
I've got
down there.
another one that
Right.
I'm working on down in. It's actually down farther than that, but it's also down in Bigfoot and Grassman territory.
Oh yeah.
Oh, here we go. That's kind of our that's kind of our new obsession a little bit. We're dabbling heavy into other things. We're I don't know. We've been I don't want to give too much away, but we've been pretty busy. So we'll just say that.
We've been hitting the ghost stuff pretty hard.
Yeah, we've been hitting the ghost stuff hard. That'll come to fruition here in the future. So But definitely, this is great, man. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
No problem.
Absolutely. Well, we'll have to attend the next MUFON event.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
We'll have to show up. And,
I don't know when the next one's going to be. We've been holding off because of the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of threw a wrench in the works for everybody.
Yeah, I've been thinking about doing a Zoom conference.
That'd be a good idea.
Yeah,
Putting
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
together. Yeah.
We can
Because
shout it out
even-
to our limited following. Just let us know.
Yeah, we'll play anything you got. Yeah, we'll plug in a video. And
This honestly could be the episode that breaks it through. We got so much good content tonight.
this is
It could be the one that puts it under too, right?
right. Yeah, we never know. We'll go like, man, that damn Tom guy, he really tanked us.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
No
Until
problem.
next time.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, man.